Welcome to Copilot Podcasts. You know what's wild? The most dangerous weapon in the room right now might be that innocent-looking walking stick in the corner. Today, we're diving into the fascinating parallel between cane fighting and Marvel villains' weapons, and how ordinary objects become extraordinary tools of power.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. And it's not just fiction. Historically, canes were actually designed as legitimate self-defense weapons.
Wait, really? Like, people were actually fighting with fancy walking sticks?
Exactly. In fact, there's an entire martial art called Bartitsu that was created in the Victorian era. It was so significant that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even had Sherlock Holmes use it.
That's fascinating. And, it reminds me of how Marvel villains often take everyday objects and transform them into something deadly.
Right, like Dr. Octopus with his mechanical arms, they were originally just tools for handling radioactive materials.
And speaking of weapons, I heard there's some pretty intense cane fighting techniques out there.
Oh yeah, modern cane fighting systems like the American cane system incorporate everything from linear strikes to circular movements. It's incredibly comprehensive.
So it's not just about whacking someone with a stick?
Not at all. According to martial arts expert Paul Votava, there are specific techniques like the figure eight, hammer principle, and even defenses against edged weapons.
That's pretty sophisticated. It reminds me of how Marvel villains often have these incredibly well thought out weapon systems.
Exactly. Take the Mandarin's rings, each one had a unique ability, from manipulating atomic structures to controlling minds.
So both in real life and comics, it's about turning something ordinary into something extraordinary?
Precisely. And what's really interesting is how both cane fighting and villain weapons often rely on the element of surprise.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in cane fighting, one of the advantages is that people don't expect a walking stick to be a weapon. Similarly, many Marvel villains use weapons that appear harmless at first glance.
Like Ebony Maw's microneedles in Infinity War?
Exactly. They seemed insignificant, but were powerful enough to torture Doctor Strange.
You know what's interesting? While heroes often use mythical weapons like Thor's hammer, villains tend to modify everyday objects.
That's a fascinating observation. It's like they're taking the ordinary and corrupting it, which makes them even more threatening in a way.
And speaking of threatening, let's talk about how cane fighting techniques have evolved over time.
Well, modern systems like Cane Fu actually combine traditional techniques with practical self-defense. It's designed to be effective regardless of age or physical condition.
That's pretty cool. It's like the democratization of self-defense.
Exactly. And you know what's fascinating? The cane as a weapon actually has a lot in common with how Marvel depicts power dynamics.
How so?
Well, just like how a cane can be both a support tool and a weapon, many Marvel villains' weapons often have dual purposes.
Like Doctor Doom's armor, it's both protection and a weapon system.
Precisely. And it's packed with additional weapons and computer systems, just like how modern tactical canes often have hidden features.
That's wild. So there's really this parallel between real-world martial arts and comic book weaponry?
Absolutely. Both are about taking something seemingly ordinary and revealing its hidden potential.
You mentioned hidden features in tactical canes. What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, some modern tactical canes might include reinforced striking points or ergonomic grips, similar to how the Penguin's umbrella in Batman contains various hidden weapons.
It's interesting how both villains and martial artists seem to understand the power of unexpected weapons.
Right, and in both cases, it's not just about the weapon itself, it's about the skill and strategy behind it.
Like how cane fighting isn't just about strength, but technique?
Exactly. The American cane system emphasizes leverage and efficiency over brute force, just like how many Marvel villains rely on cunning rather than raw power.
That's a really interesting parallel I never would have thought of.
And you know what's even more fascinating? Both cane fighting and villain weapons often have this element of psychological warfare.
What do you mean?
Well, there's something particularly unnerving about someone turning an everyday object into a weapon. It challenges our sense of what's safe and what's dangerous.
Kind of like how the Grandmaster's control discs in Thor Ragnarok seemed so simple but were terrifyingly effective?
Exactly. They were just small discs, but they could control even the most powerful beings in the universe.
It's almost like the simpler the weapon appears, the more threatening it can be.
That's a great observation. It's why both martial artists and comic book creators often focus on the transformation of ordinary objects.
Speaking of transformation, how did cane fighting evolve from Victorian times to today?
Well, modern systems like universal cane systems have adapted traditional techniques for contemporary self-defense situations, making them more practical and accessible.
Kind of like how Marvel villains' weapons have evolved from simple tools to complex systems?
Precisely. Look at how Dr. Octopus's arms evolved from simple mechanical tools to sophisticated AI-enhanced weapons.
It's fascinating how both real and fictional weapons seem to follow this pattern of evolution.
And in both cases, the evolution often reflects the society they exist in.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Victorian-era cane fighting reflected the gentlemanly culture of the time, just like how modern Marvel villains' weapons often reflect our fears about technology.
That's a really interesting sociological perspective.
And it goes even deeper. Both cane fighting and villain weapons often challenge our assumptions about power and who can wield it.
How so?
Well, cane fighting shows that someone who might appear vulnerable can be quite formidable, just like how Marvel villains often turn their perceived weaknesses into strengths.
That's a really powerful parallel.
And it's why both continue to fascinate people. They challenge our expectations about power and capability.
So what's the big takeaway from all this?
I think it's that innovation in weaponry, whether in real martial arts or comic books, often comes from transforming the ordinary into something extraordinary.
And that sometimes the most powerful weapons are the ones we least expect?
Exactly. Whether it's a walking stick or a mechanical arm, it's not the object itself, but how it's used that makes it powerful.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Copilot Podcasts. Next time you see someone with a cane, maybe think twice before underestimating them. They might just be the next supervillain in training.
Or maybe just someone who knows their Bartitsu.
Either way, I'm definitely looking at walking sticks differently now. Thanks for joining us, everyone.